When my older brother Chad tapped his champagne glass at our father's retirement banquet, I assumed he was finally going to show some basic decency. Instead, he pointed directly at me, laughed into the microphone, and declared to 80 guests that I was nothing more than a fake soldier playing dress-up behind a desk. My father looked away, refusing to defend me, while my brother's friends snickered into their drinks. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flip a table. I just sat quietly in my dress uniform, counting the seconds. Because right at that moment, the heavy oak doors swung open. A 4-star general walked into the banquet hall flanked by military police, scanned the silent room, and asked for me by my real call sign. And the leather case in his hands was about to destroy every single lie my family had ever told. My name is Elena Reyes. I am 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the ghost in my own family's living room. Growing up, the spotlight belonged exclusively to my older brother Chad. Chad was charismatic, loud, and ruthless, the golden child who went into corporate defense consulting and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how much money he made. Our father, a retired police chief who valued bravado over quiet discipline, treated Chad like royalty. Anything Chad did was a triumph. Anything I did was barely worth an acknowledgement. When Chad bought his first luxury sports car, Dad threw a neighborhood barbecue. When I graduated at the top of my class and commissioned into the United States Army, Dad shook my hand and asked when I was going to get a real civilian career. To my family, my military service was just a prolonged phase of playing dress-up behind a desk. That was partly by design. For the past 6 years, my assignments had been attached to high-stakes intelligence and rapid deployment logistics. By federal law and strict operational security protocols, I was legally forbidden from discussing where I went, the operations I coordinated, or the things I saw. When I disappeared for 8 months at a time, I simply told them I was handling administrative supply routes. Chad weaponized my silence. At every Thanksgiving dinner and family holiday, he spun my classified service into a running joke, claiming I spent my days filing paperwork in air-conditioned trailers while real heroes did the heavy lifting. I never corrected him. In my line of work, you learn that real professionals don't need applause from people who have never stood in the dark. I had only touched down on domestic soil 48 hours before Dad's retirement banquet, fresh off an intense, non-permissive extraction tour. I had bruised ribs, stitches in my shoulder, and 22 reasons to hold my head high. But Chad only saw an easy target. The Grand Oak Banquet Hall was packed with 80 guests. Retired police officers, local politicians, extended family, and a handful of Chad's wealthy corporate associates. Dad was in his element, holding court by the open bar, soaking in decades of congratulations. I sat quietly at a corner table near the back, wearing my pristine Army service uniform. Every crease was sharp, every brass button polished to a mirror shine, though underneath the dark blue fabric, the medical tape across my fractured ribs burned with every breath. I hadn't come for accolades. I had come simply out of respect for my father's 35 years of public service. Then Chad took the stage. He tapped a butter knife against his crystal champagne glass, the sharp ringing echoing through the speakers until the room fell silent. With an expensive tailored suit and a smirk rehearsed for boardrooms, Chad began his toast. He spent 2 minutes praising Dad's grit and dedication, but I knew my brother too well. Chad never held a microphone unless he intended to elevate himself by stepping on someone else. Of course, dedication runs in our blood, Chad said, his voice dripping with condescension as his gaze locked directly onto me. Though clearly, it skips a few steps depending on which child you look at. A quiet ripple of unease passed through the tables. "Look at my sister Elena," Chad continued, chuckling into the microphone. "Sitting back there in full uniform, looking very official. But let's be honest with the room, Elena. You're a fake soldier. Just a girl playing dress-up behind an air-conditioned desk while real men do the actual fighting. You wear the suit, but we all know your ribbons are basically corporate participation trophies." A few of Chad's friends laughed and clapped. Dad looked down into his drink, neither correcting him nor meeting my eyes. I didn't flinch. I kept my chin level, breathing steadily through the ache in my ribs. Then, before Chad could deliver his punchline, 2 loud rhythmic knocks rattled the heavy double doors at the main entrance. The entire room went dead silent. The banquet hall's heavy oak doors swung open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. 2 armed military police officers in full dress uniform stepped inside, posting themselves on either side of the entryway. Between them walked a silver-haired officer whose commanding presence demanded immediate respect. 4 silver stars gleamed on the epaulets of his jacket. General Robert Vance, commander of Central Operations. A murmur of genuine shock swept through the crowd. Dad froze, his glass halfway to his mouth, while local city officials instinctively straightened up in their chairs. Chad, ever the opportunist, immediately assumed the spotlight was meant for him. He adjusted his silk tie, plastered a rehearsed charismatic grin on his face, and practically sprinted down from the podium toward the entrance. "General Vance, sir." Chad beamed loudly, extending his hand with theatrical confidence so the whole room could hear. "What an absolute honor. I assume you're here regarding our defense logistics consulting contract with the county, or perhaps to personally honor our father's retirement from the department. Chad Reyes, senior partner. Truly a pleasure." General Vance didn't even slow his stride. He didn't take Chad's hand. He didn't offer a nod. He didn't even look at him. Vance simply walked right past my brother, his shoulder brushing past Chad's outstretched arm as if Chad were an invisible coat rack. Chad's smile shattered in real time. His hand hung awkwardly in empty air while his corporate associates watched in mortified silence. General Vance kept his eyes locked forward, scanning the room until his gaze landed on my modest table in the far corner. Every head turned to follow his path as the 4-star general walked directly toward me. Before I could fully push back my chair against the sharp pain in my fractured ribs, General Vance stopped 2 feet in front of my table. He stood at rigid attention, brought his right hand up with razor-sharp precision, and delivered a crisp, formal salute. "Captain Reyes." The general's voice resonated through the entire silent hall. "I flew 500 miles on direct executive orders tonight. I've been looking for you." I stood up, snapped to attention despite the sharp ache across my ribcage, and returned the general's salute. "At ease, Captain," General Vance said, his gravelly voice cutting through the stunned banquet hall. From under his arm, he produced a velvet-lined mahogany presentation case and opened it, revealing the distinctive bronze cross and blue and red ribbon of the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second-highest military decoration for extraordinary heroism in combat. The room held its collective breath. My father stared with wide eyes, completely immobilized, while Chad stood frozen 10 feet away, his face turning an ash-gray shade of pale. "4 nights ago," General Vance announced, turning slightly so his voice carried to every corner of the room, "Captain Elena Reyes led a high-threat extraction team into hostile territory after an Allied convoy was ambushed. When communication lines were severed, she refused to withdraw. Despite taking shrapnel to her shoulder and suffering broken ribs from a direct blast, Captain Reyes coordinated defensive fire, held the line for 4 hours under sustained assault, and successfully evacuated 22 wounded soldiers. Every single one of them is alive today because of her." A suffocating silence blanketed the hall. The very people who had chuckled at Chad's cheap jokes moments earlier looked down at their plates in sheer humiliation. General Vance stepped forward, carefully pinning the medal above the ribbons on my jacket. He leaned in, speaking quietly so only I could hear. "You did your country proud, Elena. Your team sends their deepest gratitude." "Thank you, General," I whispered, holding my posture steady. Then, General Vance turned his gaze slowly toward Chad. He looked my brother up and down, taking in the tailored suit, the dropped jaw, and the microphone Chad had abandoned on the table. "I overheard a portion of your toast on my way through the corridor, young man," Vance said calmly, every syllable hitting like a sledgehammer. "In my 40 years of military service, I have learned that the loudest men in the room are usually the ones who have never sacrificed a single drop of blood for anyone else. You should consider it the greatest privilege of your life that you share a surname with this woman." Chad looked like he was about to collapse. The corporate clients at his table turned their backs to him, whispering in utter disgust, while my father lowered his head, completely shattered by the truth. The silence in the room was heavier than any artillery barrage I had ever endured. Chad took a tentative, trembling step toward me, his hands shaking at his sides. "Elena, I didn't know," he stammered. His polished arrogance completely vanished. "I was just joking around for the crowd. You know how I get. I'm sorry." I didn't answer him. I didn't yell, insult him, or demand an apology in front of his peers. The raw, undeniable truth had already done the work for me. Behind Chad, his major corporate defense client picked up his jacket, shook his head in disgust, and walked out the door without saying goodbye. Chad's hollow reputation was crumbling right before his eyes, built on loud words and zero substance. My father slowly walked over, his eyes red and filled with an unbearable weight of guilt. For 31 years, he had overlooked his daughter to feed his son's shallow ego. "Elena," he choked out, his voice cracking. I had no idea what you were going through. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." I looked at him, feeling no anger, only a quiet, freeing clarity. "Thank you, Dad," I said calmly. "Happy retirement." I turned back to General Vance, saluted him one last time, and collected my coat from the back of my chair. I didn't stay for dessert. I didn't stay to bask in the applause that finally began to ripple through the room. I walked out of the Grand Oak Banquet Hall with my head held high and my boots clicking steadily against the polished floor. True honor doesn't need a microphone, and courage has never required an audience. Those who have truly stood in the fire never feel the need to boast about the smoke.